Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. So welcome to our weekly session on Bhagavad Gita. Today we are starting chapter 13 of Bhagavad Gita. Now, a lot of people, those who are expert on the field, they believe, and I also believe, that the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita provide knowledge on the individual human being. The next 6 chapters, they provide knowledge on the supreme power. So we can say it that it is Jeev and then Brahma. And now the next 6 chapters, they provide knowledge on the functioning of the whole world, or you can call it Maya. So we can also say Jeev, Brahma and Maya. These are the three topics which have been covered in Bhagavad Gita in great detail. And they have been covered in a very practical way. And that is why Bhagavad Gita is called as a sort of, mm, ras or nichod of Upanishads and Vedas. This is the crux, you can call it, but crux not only in the sense of summary, but also in the sense of practical application. So now how that actually is true, let's have a brief look at the 12 chapters which we have gone through so far. Very briefly, I'll go over them to explain how they are dealing with the individual first 6 and the next 6, how they dealt with the supreme power. Now, first chapter was about the dilemma or delusion of Arjun, where he was perplexed. He said, how can I kill my own gurus and my own pitamah and own people, and what is the utility of inheriting this world or the pleasures of this world after having such a bloodshed. So he speaks a lot in chapter 1. Lord Krishna speaks nothing in that chapter. The conversation is basically it's a narration, or I would say sermon by Arjun. Then in the second chapter, Lord Krishna doesn't speak till verse number 11. He starts only from verse number 12. And the second chapter, he starts with explanation of the human body. He says that your Atma is Ajar Amar. It cannot be destroyed. It cannot be cut by weapons. It cannot be, destroyed by fire. The wind cannot affect it. He says this Atma is basically like, immutable. It's eternal. It cannot be destroyed. It has no birth and no death. And the body is primarily like a clothing on that Atma. Uh, and as we change clothing, when the clothes become torn and becomes useless, we change them. Similarly, the Atma changes the body. So he goes into that detail, and then at the end, he also talks about how can you have sthir buddhi, that is, how can you stabilize your intellect, and how you can overcome this kind of dilemma. So there are some uh, individual discussions entirely on the basis of human constitution. That is how it is. Now, chapter 3 also deals with the same process, but in the karma yoga side. The chapter 3 talks about that how you perform your activities. You cannot remain without any activity any time in your life. The birth or the coming into this universe means beginning of activity. कर्म करना, हर सेकंड आप कर्म करेंगे संसार में, बिना कर्म के आप रह नहीं सकते. And therefore you have to do the karma, but how you do that without desiring to have an outcome, or without expecting an outcome. If you do, then it's much better. That's why they say karmanyavadikaraste ma phalesu kadachan. So you do your duty, but don't expect outcome, because outcome is determined by something else. A much larger forces operate to determine the outcome. So he talks about again that individual philosophy, how we should act in our life, but based again on the individual constitution. Now, chapter number 4th talks about birth, rebirth, four varnas, and how you can, develop a what you call स्थित प्रज्ञ. Once again he talks about ब्रह्म में स्थिति कैसे हो आपकी. So that is again an individual, how he can integrate himself with the supreme force. Then he also chapter 5 it talks about karma sannyas and karma yoga. Again, basically the same individual forces, how he operates, how these forces operate inside us. All these are basically operating on the individual system. And chapter 6, indriyon ka nigrah. Now, for example, how you control your mind, how you control your senses, how you uh, can be impervious, or if not impervious, how you can be ignore or accept the realities without affecting yourself inside. So these 6 chapters are basically chapters on the individual constitutions of the humans. Then the next 6 chapters, chapter number 7, for example, he starts with the process that I have Parashakti and Aparashakti. And Aparashakti gives birth to 8 elements, and Parashakti provides them life. So here he introduces the supreme power, how the supreme power comes into place and how it acts. And then he says that the whole world is woven in me. The For example, he has given an example कि जैसे धागे में धागे के मोती जैसे पिरोए जाते हैं, उस तरह से पूरा संसार मेरे अंदर पिरोया हुआ है. So he talks about the supreme power here. The chapter number 7 starts from there. And then chapter number 8 again talks about, because the questions are asked, what is Brahma, what is Adhyatma, what is Adidev, what is Adibhut. All these questions which were raised by Arjun, they were answered in chapter number 8. So that is also dealing with the supreme power primarily. Then chapter number 9, here he has said that I am giving you the most sacred knowledge. Now, in that sacred knowledge, he says that I am pervading this universe as the water pervades ice. Water, ice is nothing but water. Similarly, he says that this whole world is nothing but me. So this is what he has given that example. He says that I am the doer. I am the giving birth to everything. I am sustaining this whole world, and I am responsible for its dissolution. All that. So it's a very detailed explanation of the supreme power in chapter number 9. Chapter number 10, now how the supreme power manifests itself in various objects in this world. So that is what it is called vibhuti. Arjuna was asking, किस रूप में मैं आपका प्रणाम करूं, मैं किस रूप में आपका ध्यान करूं, मेरे को विभूतियां बताइए अलग अलग. So he explains the various manifestations of the supreme power in this universe, in this world, and that is how this verse again covers what you call the supreme power in greater detail. And chapter 11, of course, is the practical manifestation. He shows his Vishwadrup, he shows his universal form to Arjuna, and then that is how he sees. He sees the whole universe together in one particular place, and he gets completely perplexed. He is absolutely disillusioned. He doesn't know what to do. And he also finds that the death is also there and birth is also there. Everything is there, and he gets scared, and he requests Lord Krishna to, come back to his normal form. So this is how he displayed the universal form, the power of the Supreme. And chapter 12, we discussed that how we can worship the Supreme in the form of without form or with form, Sagun and Nirgun, in what form we should do and how. And then he explains that, of course, you can do in either of the forms, but Sagun form is easier for the humans because we believe, because with our sense organs, we can see the things, objects, we can see objects, and because we can see certain image in front of us, we can stabilize ourselves into that image. If there's no image and it's totally vacuum, then it is not easy for us to stabilize ourselves. So this is what he talks about in all these chapters. Now let's go to chapter number 13. So we start with this chapter. Now this chapter will deal with how the two forces interact with each other. This is a very fascinating chapter. I would call this is one of the greatest science which will come into this chapter. And this chapter also talks what is knowledge and what is darkness. So, and then in this later section, it will also describe in greater detail the supreme power to explain the entire process. So let's start with chapter number 13, verse number 1. श्री कृष्ण भगवान बोले, हे अर्जुन, यह शरीर क्षेत्र है, इस नाम से इसे जाना गया है, और जो इसको जानता है उसको क्षेत्रज्ञ कहते हैं. जो ज्ञानी जन इस तत्व को जानते हैं वो इसी तरह से इसके बारे में चर्चा करते हैं. नाउ क्षेत्र एंड क्षेत्र, ये शरीर, अब द संस्कृत वर्ड इज इदम शरीरम क्षेत्रम. idam shariram konte kshetram. So konte is Arjun, but idam shariram kshetram. ये शरीर क्षेत्र है. क्षेत्र क्या है? Now if we translate word kshetra exactly in English, it means field. Even in Hindi terms is also called field, kshetra. We also have kshetrajña, but in a different context. Now all the activities are performed in this field. For example, you take a field in which a farmer is cultivating. Now he prepares the soil, he puts the seed inside, he waters the plants, he puts fertilizer, he takes care, he makes sure there's enough sunlight everywhere. All those things are taken care of. So, and then he gets the final crop from that field. So exactly the same way the body is a field. In this field, we sow the seeds through our actions. Our actions are germinating seeds. And from those seeds, the results come out, the crop comes out. So the kshetra is basically telling us that this body is kshetra. This body is a field where our actions are germinating lot of seeds, and those seeds are giving us the positive or negative results depending on what we put in our actions. So that is what called kshetra. And he says the kshetrajञ, जो इस शरीर को जानता है, जो इस क्षेत्र को जानता है, the entity which knows this kshetra is kshetrajञ. Now which entity knows? We know that our own, there is a consciousness inside which knows our body, which knows the functioning, which knows what I am thinking, which knows what I am doing, which knows how I am acting, how I am interacting. Now that knower inside, when we do meditation, we try to distinguish the knower and the known, or we can say drashya and drashta. We try to segregate the two. So this is what he's explaining here, that the drashta is the kshetrajञ and drashya is the field. Now field is not only a drashya, but activities are also happening in that field. That's why the word field is better than drashya. Drashya could be absolutely still without any action or reaction, but the field is not still. In the field, we do lot of activities. So similarly, in this body, we are doing a lot of activities, and the drashta, the Kṣhetrajña, is watching. So in certain ways, you can say that the Jivatma is the drashta, and this body with senses and intellect and mind is the Kṣhetra. That is what he wants to say here, the distinction between Kṣhetra and Kṣhetrajña. Now, verse number 2. हे अर्जुन, तू सब क्षेत्रों में क्षेत्रज्ञ मुझी को जान, और क्षेत्र क्षेत्रज्ञ अर्थात विकार सहित प्रकृति और पुरुष का तत्व से जानना ही ज्ञान है, ऐसा मेरा मत है. Now, here it is a very interesting explanation. Kshetra is separate, that is clear. Kṣhetrajña is Jivatma, this is our consciousness, because we can observe all the activities in the Kshetra. Then he says that Kṣhetrajña mujhi ko jaan. So what he is saying here is that the Jivatma and Paramatma are the same. The Jivatma and Paramatma are not separate. So this is exactly what Ved say, Aham Brahmasmi or Tattvamasi, those Mahavakya of Vedas, exactly is saying the same thing, which Lord Krishna is saying here, कि सब क्षेत्रों में क्षेत्रज्ञ मुझे ही जान, means the Paramatma is residing in each one of us in the form of Jivatma, and that Jivatma and Paramatma are identical, they are not different. So this is in certain ways reiteration of those Mahavakyas in Vedas, which pronounce that you are Brahma, or you have the supreme power inside you. Now the same thing is Lord Krishna is saying in this verse. Then he says, the second part of this verse is, क्षेत्र और क्षेत्रज्ञ को विकार सहित तत्व से जानना ही ज्ञान है. Now this is the most critical part which starts from in this chapter. विकार सहित, क्षेत्र और क्षेत्रज्ञ दोनों को विकार सहित जानना. Now that is where the Maya comes into play. How the world operates, how we operate in this world, is the whole thing will be explained here. Vikar Sahit means how the modification takes place, how the changes happen, how one thing converts into another, and how they interact and react against each other. So this is what Vikar. So Vikar, how that happens in Kṣhetra and how that happens in Kṣhetrajña, and how the interaction between the two causes Vikar, and how the Maya is created when we live in this world. So this is, he says, if we know this, that is Gyan. Knowing this is Gyan. In fact, he will explain the Gyan further later on in this chapter in greater detail. But fundamentally, this is what he said, कि क्षेत्र और क्षेत्रज्ञ को समझना और उनके विकारों को समझना ही ज्ञान है. Now this is very, very fascinating. Now let's go to verse number 3. वह क्षेत्र जो है और जैसा है तथा जिन विकारों वाला है, जिस कारण से हुआ है, तथा वह क्षेत्रज्ञ भी जो और जिस प्रभाव वाला है, वह संक्षेप से मेरे से सुन. Now क्षेत्र is subject to modification. That is why विकार होते हैं, उसमें विकार होते हैं, modify, it keeps modifying. But Kṣhetrajña doesn't modify, it has प्रभाव वाला. किस प्रभाव वाला है? So the wording which has been used are very different here. And the Kṣhetrajña is प्रभाव वाला and Kṣhetra is विकार वाला. And वो मेरे से संक्षेप से सुन, that I will explain to you in briefly how it works. Now he says in the next verse, ये क्षेत्र और क्षेत्रज्ञ का तत्व ऋषियों द्वारा बहुत प्रकार से कहा गया है. He says that I'm not claiming that I'm only saying this. This has been said by many saints in the past in a variety of ways. Like Vedas says that, truth is one, but the wise express in different ways. Exactly, he is saying here that the various saints in the past have explained this in great detail in different ways. और विविध वेद मंत्रों द्वारा भी विभाग पूर्वक कहा गया है. ये क्षेत्र और क्षेत्रज्ञ का जो तत्व है वो समझाया गया है वेद मंत्रों में भी. There is a lot of description in Upanishads on this. Upanishad is actually the part of Vedas. तथा भली भांति निश्चय किए हुए युक्ति युक्त ब्रह्म सूत्र के पदों द्वारा भी कहा गया है. Now Brahma Sutra is another book which is very, very fascinating book in the form of sutras, very short sutras, but greatly explained. So these, he is quoting, he is saying that this particular aspect, Kṣhetra and Kṣhetrajña, has been explained in variety of ways by the ancient rishis, by Vedas and by Brahma Sutras in different ways, in different language. So he is not claiming that I am only one who is telling you. This has been told and this is being reiterated by me here. Now verse number 5. This is where we have to go in a greater depth, which will explain us what we are. 5 महाभूत, अहंकार, बुद्धि और मूल प्रकृति तथा 10 इंद्रियां और एक मन और 5 इंद्रियों के विषय अर्थात शब्द, स्पर्श, रूप, रस, गंध. देन नेक्स्ट वर्स. तथा इच्छा, द्वेष, सुख, दुख, स्थूल देह का पिंड, चेतना और धृति, इस प्रकार विकारों के सहित ये क्षेत्र संक्षेप में कहा गया है. Now in these 2 verses he explained the Kṣhetra, verse number 5 and 6. Now this is not going to tell you much if we read it like this. We need to understand in greater detail. So let's read it once again and then we'll go into the details. 5 महाभूत, अहंकार, बुद्धि और मूल प्रकृति, 10 इंद्रियां, एक मन, 5 इंद्रियों के विषय. इंद्रियां अलग हैं, इंद्रियों के विषय अलग हैं, अर्थात शब्द, स्पर्श, रूप, रस एंड गंध, तथा इच्छा, द्वेष, सुख, दुख, स्थूल देह का पिंड, चेतना और धृति, इस प्रकार विकारों के सहित ये क्षेत्र संक्षेप में कहा गया है. Now this is one of the greatest signs of origin of this world. Now you have to imagine here that we are in total pralaya. There is nothing which is in existence right now. Everything is absolutely avyakt, that we call non-manifest. That non-manifest state comes as per our Shastras when complete pralaya happens. The whole thing is dissolved into its own way, and we also call it the night of Brahma. ब्रह्मा की रात्रि जो है उसमें सब चीजें डिजॉल्व हो जाती. So imagine that state, how the world appears from that state, how the manifestation takes place from that avyakt place state. So the first state is avyakt state, where everything is dissolved. It's like the night of Brahma. Okay. From there, the first manifestation of this universe comes from what we call Mahat Tattva. That the first element which evolves from the avyakt. Avyakt is the first state, which is like nothing is visible. Everything is like a dark hole, as the scientists call these days, a completely black hole. So from that black hole, the first emergence is that of Mahat Tattva, that the first element which evolves out of that black hole. And Mahat Tattva develops into Ahankar. Now Lord Krishna has used here this word, Ahankar. Mool Prakrti. Now, Mool Prakrti is actually Mahat Tattva. Mahat Tattva is the beginning or evolution from Avyakt to the first stage. The second stage from Mahat Tattva is Ahankar. Ahankar means the realization that I am there. It is not the ego which we normally understand in the worldly language. That is a secondary part. The first part is realization of existence, that I am. For example, when we get up in the morning, we say, oh, I am existing. So that is the awareness of your being there. That awareness is called ahankar in its evolutionary word. So the from the avyakt, first evolution is Mahat Tattva. From Mahat Tattva, the evolution comes in the form of ahankar, that I am here, I am existing. Now from that ahankar, then it ahankar gets divided into five senses. Now five elements come into play. The five elements, I'm not talking about the gross elements right now, but there are five elements which come in the form of Shabd, Spars, Roop, Rang, and Gandh. These are, they call them uh, actually Tanmatra. In Sanskrit, they are also called Tanmatra. So the first evolution is the Shabd. That is the evolution when, you know, the Shabd comes, that hearing, sense of hearing and the sound both. Now that sense of hearing and sound is the first evolution. Then this gives rise to spars. In case of the Shabd, there is only one quality, that is the quality of sound. In case of spars, touch, there are two qualities. One, the quality of sound which comes from the first element, and second, its own quality, that is the spars, touch. So our skin, it has two qualities. One is the sound. When somebody touches, you feel the sound, or the wind blows, you feel that touch there, that is the sound, and then you feel the touch as well. So the sound and touch, the two qualities come into the form of spars. Then the next one is tanmatra, is roop. Roop is the form. The form you can see only when there is light, when there is agni. So the sun rises in the morning and you feel all the plants and vegetables and houses. When the absolutely dark everywhere, you cannot distinguish, you cannot feel the existence. So the roop is visible only when the fire comes into place, or the light comes into place. So that is the third. Now the third one, the light has three qualities. It has a quality of sound, it also has the quality of touch, and it has its own quality of light and heat. So that is the evolution which is happening. This is what vikar, the change is happening. This is called vikar in the Kṣhetra. The stage, first stage was avyakt, then came the stage of the first element Mahat Tattva. Then from Mahat Tattva it came into evolution, came into Ahankar. From Ahankar it developed into Shabd. From Shabd it came to Spars. From Spars it came now to form Roop. And from Roop, the fourth thing which develops, fourth Tanmatra which develops, is called Ras. Ras is the one which you feel when there is something liquid which goes in your mouth with watery. Without that, you do not feel the taste of the things. The taste is related to water. So the fourth element has all the four qualities. It has the sound quality, it also has the quality of touch, then it also has the quality of sight, and then it has its own quality, which is the quality of taste. So that's the fourth tanmatra, and the fifth tanmatra is the gandh, that is the smell. That uh, quality has all the five qualities, starting from shabd, then uh, spars, then roop, then rush, and then gandh. So this is how the evolution takes place. विकार जो हो रहा है ना, that is how the evolution takes place in stages. These are, you can say, 8 stages we have already counted. Avyakt, from avyakt comes Mahat Tattva, from Mahat Tattva comes Ahankar, then comes Shabd, then comes Spars, then comes Roop, then comes Rush, and then comes Gandh, touch, the smell. So this is how the tanmatras develop. That is the vikar which happens in the Kṣhetra. Now all these tanmatras also have 3 qualities, that is Sat, Raj and Tam, which we have discussed in the past, which will also be coming in the next 14 and 15 chapters in greater detail. So the tanmatra with the Sat element gives birth to our 5 senses. The 5 tanmatras with the sattvic element gives birth to ज्ञानेंद्री, 5 ज्ञानेंद्रियां, जैसे अपना ईयर है, स्किन है टच के लिए, आई साइट के लिए है, टेस्ट के लिए अपना माउथ है, टंग है, एंड देन स्मेल के लिए नोज है. So the sattvic part of these 5 tanmatras give birth to the 5 human senses of perception. The rajas part of these 5 tanmatras, rajas means active, which makes you act, that gives birth to 5 karmendriya. Now 5 karmendriya we have. First is the speech, that is again connected to the first part of a speech, we are able to speak. Then we have hands movement, then we have legs on which we walk, then we have waste disposal, and then we have sexual organ. So these 5 karmendriya, they come respectively from these 5 tanmatras. The tanmatra of, let me take the English wording so that would be easier. The tanmatra of shabd, that is sound, is giving birth to the speech. The tanmatra of touch, spars, is giving birth to our hand activities of hand, the motor of the hand. The tanmatra of roop, or you see, that is giving birth to our legs, the motor of our movement, which gives. Then tanmatra of rush gives birth to our sexual organ, the watery substance. And the tanmatra of gandh gives birth to the waste disposal, that is our the stool which we take out from there. So these are the 5 karmendriya which are given birth by these tanmatras. So this is the rajas part of these 5 tanmatras. Then there is a tamas part of the 5 tanmatras. Now tamas part of these 5 tanmatras give birth to the 5 gross elements which we see outside. Now we see Akash. Akash is the tamas element of Shabd. That is all the sounds which we hear in the Akash, because Akash is the media of all the sounds. When you see millions and trillions of sounds are passing in this Akash every millisecond. all these phones which we talk, all the internet, all the musical things, all these things are radio waves and God knows all kinds of waves. They are all there in this Akash. Now that is the tamas part of Shabd. So the Rajas part gave birth to speech. The Sattvic part gave birth to our sense of hearing, and the Tamas part gave birth to Akash. So this is how the first Tanmatra. The second Tanmatra is Tanmatra of touch or spars. Now that Tanmatra gives birth to the wind which blows. The wind gives the touch. When the wind touches our body, we feel. So that is the spurs. Immediately we get a feeling that there's something, somebody, there's some movement. The skin feels that touch. Somebody touches you from behind. He has not seen you or you have not seen him. Then you feel there is somebody touching me. So that is the spurs. That tanmatra in its sattva organ gives birth to the uh, our sense of feeling the touch. Then in the rajas it gives birth to our hands, which is also part of touch. And then in the tamas sense it gives birth to vayu, that is the sthul part, that is the gross part of this existence. Then roop. Roop tanmatra also has three elements. One is coming from satas part, sattvic part, another from rajas part, and third is from tamas part. From the sattvic part, it gives us the eyesight, the sense of eyes. From the tamas, it gives birth to the feet, the motor of our movement. And from the tamas, it gives birth to the fire. Because the fire, and you can call it light or sun, whatever name you give, but in our shastra, it is used Agni. Agni is the one, sun is also a form of Agni. So all the lights are form of Agni. So that Agni is the third sthul or gross element which comes out of this tanmatra. Similarly, Ras gives birth to these three tanmatras. The one is the taste which we develop in our mouth and tongue. That is from the sattvic part. From rajas part is our sexual organ, and from tamas part comes water, which you see in the oceans and rivers and all that. That is the gross part of it. And then finally the gandh, that is the fifth tanmatra, which modifies or gives modification. These are all vikar. The word vikar which has been used, how the senses are formed, how the five gross elements are formed. That is a science which has been explained in these mantras. In the first mantra is that science, and fifth number 5, and the sixth will explain something else. So the gandh tanmatra in its sattvic form gives birth to our sense of smell. In the rajas form, it gives birth to our waste disposal system, stool. And in the gross form, it gives birth to the earth. Earth is the what you call source of smell. So this is how the whole universe is starting from avyakt, coming to the first element, which is Mahat Tattva, then coming to Ahankar, and then coming to these 5 Tanmatras, and then 5 Tanmatras evolving into 5 senses of action, 5 senses of perception, and then 5 Panch Mahabhut, which are stool, these are gross elements which we see in the world. This is how they evolve. So this is the science explained in verse number 5. The word which they have been used, vikar, कैसे विकार पैदा होते हैं, how they evolve into different forms. Like for example, we can see it in our own world also. Like new materials are created by mixing certain things, and new materials are done. From the same clay you can produce different variety of images. Thousands and millions of images can be produced. From the same cotton you can produce thousands of different varieties of clothings in different shapes and sizes and different combinations. Similarly, these five tanmatras, they give birth to these five gross uh, elements in the physical sense from the tamas part, the five karmendriya in the rajas part, and five gyanendriya in the sattvic form. This is how the world evolves. So this is what I thought I will explain today, and we will go into the next verse next time, because that also has a lot of depth in it. So it will not be easy to explain it in a short period. So we'll take that in the next session. But we must understand how these vikar, how these evolutions take place in the Kṣhetra. The Kṣhetra starts from avyakt, when nothing is manifest in the world. Everything is in total black hole or dark hole, or in a state of sleep, whatever may call it. Pralay jisko kehte hain in Sanskrit, that is what it is. And from there all this evolution happens. This is what is called vikar, and from this vikar this world is formed. That is what is sansar, and this is the greatest science which we can hear from Bhagavad Gita, which you will not find anywhere else in the world. So thank you very much for your patience, and we shall continue in our next session on verse number 6 onwards. Thank you.